leaders of the world. Welcome to Spread Love in Organizations, a podcast for purpose-driven healthcare leaders striving to make life better around the world by leading their teams with genuine care, servant leadership, and love. I'm Naji, your host today, joined by Ian MacGregor, Chief Executive Officer of Scratch Labs. Ian co-founded more than a decade ago Scratch Labs, a sports nutrition company based in Boulder, Colorado, that was recognized by Inc. 500 as the third fastest growing food and beverage company in the US. In 2007, he co-founded the Just Go Harder Foundation to provide mentorship opportunities for aspiring cyclists and ski racers. Ian is a former professional cyclist and two-time US National Espoir Road Cycling Champion. He holds a BS in mechanical engineering from the Colorado School of Mines and currently resides with his family in the small mountain town of Netherland, Colorado. I'm so excited to have you with me today, Ian.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Naji.
We're all eager to hear about your story, the journey, how you build this amazing company, Scratch, that you have today. Can you tell us a little bit more about your personal story and your journey that got you there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be sort of remiss if I didn't start by saying, in no way, right, was it myself or me alone, or even me primarily. Like so many great journeys, there's always a real team involved. So I was going all the way back. I was born in Boulder, Colorado, right? Just pure dumb luck on that one. And I grew up in the mountains about 30 minutes straight west in a rural community. And, my dad was a police officer and my mom was a nurse. And, the small town that we grew up nearby, it's kind of an interesting place. It's a little bit, I would describe it half hippie and half hick. And it kind of has both of those extremes mixed together. And, in many ways had the best of all worlds in the sense that, you could be in a safe community where your doors aren't even locked and you live on a dirt road, but, a 35-minute drive down the canyon and you're in a, community like Boulder, and another 20 minutes down the road and you're in a real city like Denver with an international airport. So, a pretty unique mix of all things. And, growing up, I was really obsessed with athletics, and I wanted nothing more in life than to be a ski racer. And I think I was about 100 pounds too light for that. I wasn't nearly that good enough. But as things happen, right, unanswered prayers, that enabled me to kind of find my way into cycling. And I think looking back, I love skiing and even ski racing more than I ever loved cycling. But I had an aptitude for cycling that enabled me to take it a long ways and pay the mortgage and travel the world, which was a really fun experience. Once again, as things come full circle, I had an injury in cycling at I think 27-ish years old, and kind of forced it into my career, which was not a fun time. I had a real identity crisis and kind of struggled to pay the bills, struggled to reinvent myself, but through that found my way back to college, and ultimately that was kind of what connected the dots to the founding of Scratch Labs.
Yeah, I want to double click on the founding of the company. And you mentioned injury, like we hear and read a lot about athlete leadership, right? And how professional athletes are amazing leaders. Tell us a little bit with the injury, obviously the resilience that you've built, the learning that you had, and then how in fact it turned into starting a company and driving a successful business today.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in there. So let me try and break those apart a little bit. I think first and foremost, as far as, learning leadership skills in sport, I think it's interesting looking back at the skills developed in sport. I think without a doubt, sport can be a great tool for developing leadership skills. I know that for myself, there were also probably some bad habits that were formed. I think of even a sport like cycling, which is it's an individual sport, but it has an enormously powerful team element, to the point that no individual is truly successful without the support of the team. And yet the irony there is that often it's the individual who sort of reaps the rewards of that teamwork. And so you get these sort of perverse incentives in the way teams work. And oftentimes, at least for somebody like myself, who was sort of on the fringe of, right, I was not the star or anywhere close, you find yourself towards the tail end of a season, not being sure whether or not you're going to have a contract for the next year. And what ends up happening in those situations is there's a subtle competition that develops within the team, out of scarcity and out of fear. And I think that I had to actually unlearn some of those lessons, because I don't believe that business is a zero-sum game. I don't believe that in business, the founder or the CEO or the, head of marketing or any one person really reaps the rewards. I think that it really all goes back to winning or losing, however you define those, as a team. So not to digress on you, but I think there's an important distinction there. As far as connecting the dots on how Scratch happened, so my business partner, Scratch Labs founder, Alan Lim, he was from the pro cycling world as well, and he's got a PhD in exercise physiology, and worked as the director of sports science for one of the teams that I raced for. And it's sort of a classic case of finding a problem that nobody else seems to find and solving that problem. So in our situation, it was, all of the riders, myself included, just complained about our sports nutrition products. And here's what I would say. I think it's a little bit like a canary in a coal mine, in the sense that, if any of us today had one or two, drinks of a sort of commercially available sports drink, you'd be just fine. But if you start having one or two, 500 milliliter servings an hour, and you do that 5 or 6 hours a day, and you do that 7 days a week, you do that 300 days a year, right? Suddenly you develop some sensitivities. And, if nothing else, you just get tired of drinking it. And so really what Alan did is he took a step back and tried to make his own stuff. And I think that he was able to start from a place of science, but had access to a group of athletes, and there was no commercial relationship involved. And so there was no ulterior motives. There was nobody with an operations department talking about scalability, or a marketing department talking about differentiation of a product. So he really was able to just build a product that worked, and ultimately worked better. And so for a handful of years, what was happening was, this homemade stuff was in the water bottles that we were using, that had a sponsor's name on the outside, but it wasn't their stuff on the inside. And the sort of inside the community, right, of that world, people started calling it secret drink mix. And just like any business community or sporting community, right, riders come and go, staff come and go, and so word spread organically. And what ended up happening is in early 2010, when I was retiring and struggling with this vascular problem in my left leg, my former teammates kept asking for this product. Alan's former colleagues kept asking for it, and we just started making it together. And it was a total pain in the ass. It was not something we wanted to be doing. It was not something that either of us saw a market opportunity for. It was just something that people were asking for. And eventually we started saying, no, I'm not going to make any more for you. And then people said, well, can we buy it? We were like, fine. And we built a website, and it was secretdrinkmix.com. And, it was really kind of this organic word of mouth that had built up a demand. So I would say reluctant entrepreneurs with pure dumb luck is kind of how we started.
Yeah, I've seen it. You talked a couple of times on reluctant entrepreneurs. Tell us a little bit more. What do you mean by this? Because I saw like this is kind of how you define you both as co-founders.
Yeah. I mean, of course, right. You have to be careful as we self-identify with things. Maybe that's how we see things, but maybe it's not the truth. But I think I literally had this blue notebook, and this notebook was filled with ideas that were really focused on problems that we thought we could solve, right? And a lot of them were from the sporting world. And a lot of these projects were really fun and cool and technical, right? So things that were being developed in a wind tunnel, new technologies with new materials, like really technical, fun things. And those were really intriguing. And this other one was sort of like just like cooking in the kitchen. It wasn't, it didn't sort of have the same pizzazz. And I don't know. I think, that book of ideas was exciting itself. And yet here was something real that we sort of ignored for a period of time. And I think the one piece that kind of changed it is we were looking specifically at doing a carbon fiber technology, and starting to understand. And I didn't know this at the time, had none of the language or experience to even see the world clearly, but I can see it now looking backwards. It had real capital costs to start that business, and this what Scratch Labs was something that we could start start ourselves. And we had a realization as well that the margins were going to be better, and that would enable us to do it on our own. And again, I didn't even know what a margin was, right? It was just sort of a recognition that you could, make £1, sell it, take that money, make 4 more, and do it again. And that had the ability to grow on its own, which was very different than some of the technology ideas that we were looking at.
Yeah, and fast forward, like more than a decade now, you're leading this company successfully. Congrats! I've seen outside magazines also gave you the 50 best places to work in 2020. So let's pivot into this leadership journey, right? Like doing it obviously from the kitchen to now leading a successful business a decade and managing to be best places to work in, which is a great achievement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been it's been a real journey, and I think my hope, right, my belief is that journey is not over, and that in some ways, right, we talk with the team a lot about we haven't come this far to only come this far. There's a lot more to do, a lot more we want to make happen and get done. As far as the leadership side, I mean, I think there's a few things. One is, oftentimes, right, we find entrepreneurs falling into a leadership position. And I think in some cases, that can be a real problem, right? The same skills that are used to start something are not necessarily the skills that are needed to lead an organization with complexity and layers of people and divergent personalities and yada, yada, yada. And I think for me, the piece that I hope has worked well, I acknowledged and realized and was aware really early that if I wanted to continue to be part of the business and not become the bottleneck for the business, I had to personally learn and grow at a rate that at the minimum was equal to the growth rate of the company. And preferably, I needed to grow faster. And it has been a journey. It's never going to be over. But I think like I said, the first step for me was sort of having that awareness. And like I mentioned, having to unlearn some of the leadership lessons from sport, that was very real. And there's a couple things that come to mind for me. One big realization in business that I don't think existed in sport, and it's not my tool, it's a tool from Gay Hendricks, but it's, he calls it the zone of genius. And it's really this acknowledgement that, people are different, and that together we can really build emergence, right? And that's something that I might be good at but don't like doing. There's somebody out there who's better at it and who loves it. And if we can acknowledge and identify those differences amongst ourselves, we can build a team where everybody can really be working in an area and working on things that not only are they great at, because that's helpful for the business, but hopefully, and we expect that they enjoy, right? And that's not to, we're not naive, right? It's not going to be 100% of the time. It's still work. But, if we could be there by and large, engagement goes up, care goes up, quality of work goes up, the results happen without a doubt. I think that's one. I think that the second big thing for me that I know I would want in a workplace, and that we've worked really hard to deliver for our team, which I realize is not perfect for everybody, and that's okay too, but is to really empower people to make their own decisions. And I have this sort of made up analogy that I use with the team all the time, where we talk about our business and our company and our team as a boat in the water. And with that, there's a water line. And when somebody makes a decision and it ends up being wrong, there's a little mini explosion. And what we want people to do is to use their judgment, and of course it's more complicated than that, but use their judgment to decide, is this decision above or below the water line? And if it's above the water line, just make the decision. Don't come ask for permission. Don't spend too much time trying to figure out all the information. Just make the decision. Because if an explosion happens, it's just a little fire, we put it out and we all move on. Of course, we've got to be aware that some decisions are below the waterline. And if that is a mistake and an explosion happens, right, the boat may sink. The beauty of that is there's very few decisions that are truly below the waterline. And so if we empower and encourage the entire team to own their worlds, to make decisions, it can happen and move things forward at a rate that could never exist or be sustained in an organization where everybody's having to ask for permission. So anyways, I don't know, two thoughts for you.
Yeah, it's a great, the second part, both are great. I want to double click on the second part, um, is on, because you talked about this fear, like people have this fear of trying new things. And it's always this line you're talking about, right? How did you empower your team, in fact, to say, okay, it's fine to try, it's fine to try? Is it really from recruiting your people who are different and who are somehow entrepreneurs, or did you really need to like get trials and errors so that people felt confident doing it?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend, right? And it's going to depend on the organization. I believe, when there were 10 of us or 15 of us, in those early years, I do believe that we probably did a better job, or excuse me, to do our best at that point. We needed to have people who were just naturally inclined, to need more autonomy. I can tell you now, as an organization, that's 4 times that size, 5 times that size in terms of number of people. That's not the case. We have amazing people who are not autonomous, who do not thrive in that naturally. And what we've done is develop the organizational sort of structure to put people in the roles where they, understand the job, where they want that job, and where they have the capacity or skills to do that job. And so it's not the same, right? You can't hire dozens of people who are all the same. Like that's not going to help with emergence. But you can design the organization around those needs, and then fill those specific needs and define them well with with the right people.
One story we discussed offline that relates somehow into the leadership, the care that you talked about. Would you be willing talking about this, the story that you lived a couple of weeks ago that kind of also made you reflect on personal and professional side of things and how to manage these days?
Yeah. So I have a 6-year-old daughter, and with COVID, the public school systems are sort of in and out, and so she's still going to sort of our community preschool a couple days a week. And I think this was about a month ago now, but we were driving over to preschool on a Monday morning, and as I'm getting my daughter out of the car, I kind of hear some screaming and yelling, and one of the teachers yelling for another teacher, and you could hear something in the voice, right? That something was going on, and I grabbed my daughter Corbin and kind of hurried across the street. And as I approached the playground, I immediately saw a young kid. I didn't know who they were exactly, and you could see they were having a seizure. I didn't know it was a seizure at the time. I just saw shaking and moving, and it was really scary. Bloody foam was coming out of his mouth, and in that moment, you could tell that one of the teachers had some medical training and was an EMT and was immediately seeing to the child's needs, but there was some real panic, and the couple of the other teachers were kind of frozen, and I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but I kind of moved without thinking about it, and was able to get all of the rest of the children inside. I grabbed a book for one of the teachers and asked her to read with the children, and was able to get a blanket for the kid. And the director of the preschool was on the phone with 911. And in this small community school, the parents' phone numbers are up on the wall, and I grabbed the kid's phone number and called his parents, who I had never met before, and let them know what was happening. And I had to let them know that if it were my child, I'd be trying to get to the preschool as soon as possible, knowing that an ambulance was coming. And everything turned out okay. This poor kid hit his head and had a seizure, and I have no medical training. Maybe you could help me out here, Najee, but he's okay. But a really scary situation, and it was really strange because after all that happened, I gave my daughter a hug and made sure she felt like she was okay, and I think she was. And I thought I was totally fine. And I went and I got in my truck and I was going to go back home to go to work. And as soon as I got in my truck, I just started bawling and was really overcome with an enormous amount of emotion, and realized how challenging and scary those situations can be. And it's just an interesting example because 30 seconds before sitting in my truck, I would have said I was totally fine and that it was completely not a big deal, quote unquote, but obviously it was. And yeah, a really hard, difficult, but also a fun situation. I think not fun. How about this? I want to see the world in color, right? I don't want to live in black and white. And color means good and bad, and emotions come good and bad. And that was a powerful moment, surprisingly experienced. Even as hard as it was, that's a way to live in color.
Now let's move to a section where I will be giving you a word, and then you will give me whatever top of mind. Sounds good?
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. So the first one is kind of obvious asking you this. Entrepreneurship.
Grit. Yeah, I think grit. Although here, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. I have a funny one. We have a bunch of core values at work, and one of them is, an expectation of accountability and grit. And oftentimes I'll ask people in interviews, what's the difference between grit and stubbornness? And of course, right, it's a one-sided joke. Nobody really knows the answer. But in my mind, it's about outcome, right? People who are stubborn are trying to do something that hasn't happened yet. As where we identify grit with people who beat their head against a wall and then broke through. And I don't know why I think it's so funny, but I think it's funny.
Love this one. Yeah. What about CEO?
I think there's two here. I know you're looking for one response, but I think the first one that comes to mind, which is maybe a sensitivity I have, is ego. I think there's a lot of ego around that title and around that position. And I think that could be a real challenge. I think the second one that I see is, I know not just one word, so I'm breaking your rules here, which maybe is an example of an entrepreneur, but it's just opportunity, right? I think that there's a real opportunity as the leader of an organization to make people's lives better. Starts with your employees, obviously extends to your customers, but that's powerful. There's a lot there.
Feedbacks.
Curiosity.
You can extend on this one. I know you love feedbacks.
All right, I'll expand on it. I think that feedback, as somebody who was, coached at a high level since I was, 9 years old, I don't think there's a greater gift than feedback. And I think that even if you ultimately disagree with it, to pause for a moment, consider where it's coming from, pretend that it's true, and then ask yourself, what is it that means? Is just a wonderful opportunity. In fact, I did this. We had a full company meeting just this last Friday, and I asked at the beginning, and our team is used to this. I said, hey, at the end of this, I'd love some feedback on how we can get better. And our team, it's a little hard in Zoom, right? Our team had a couple bits, but nothing super meaty. And so this is not my trick. I think it might have come from Adam Grant, but or maybe it was Simon Sinek. I don't know, one of those folks. I'm like, cool. Hey, how would you rate this on a scale of 1 to 10? And I got a couple 8s and 9s. I said, awesome. What would I have to do to make this a 10? Which immediately opens the box, right? And immediately turns it around to where somebody will give you feedback, even if they didn't want to. And I did. I was able to get a couple more bits that were really helpful on parts that I could improve on. And I've got them captured, and I'll do my best to to incorporate those next quarter when we do another one.
That's great. And do you create this culture of feedbacks within your company? Because sometimes people struggle with this, right? Like receiving feedbacks, giving feedbacks, and depending on cultures, I imagine within the company, but also within the country, within the global countries. So how do you
Yeah.
build this to be in a constant
Yeah,
improvement?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit there, Naji, which is that there is a cultural element to it, right? Different regions within the US, different countries across the world, people take and receive and think about and give feedback very differently. And I don't have any magic any magic pills to homogenize all of that. But I could tell you within our organization, one, back to our core values, we've got two potentially opposing, but we expect them to live in conjunction, core values. And one is really around being real, and that for us means wearing your individuality with pride, but also saying what you really mean. And the second one is that we're empathetic, and that's really about listening with care, acting with generosity, right, and understanding the impacts of what it is that you're doing or saying. And so out of that comes another framework, which is not mine, but this idea of radical candor, of being able to say what you really mean, but doing it in a way that has the other person's best interests in mind. And I think for us, with our values, there's an expectation that that happens, but we also have to mimic and exhibit that behavior and build it into our system. So, each team in our company has, a weekly meeting, and it has an agenda, and we make sure it starts on time, we make sure it ends on time. But one of the things that we end with is a rating and feedback. And it can feel a little mechanical where everyone's just giving that same rating, but running through the motions on that provides an opportunity for feedback. And when people act on that feedback, it builds and generates a culture, right, through demonstrated behavior where people are open to feedback, are open to critique.
Yeah. And it's an amazing transition to the last word, which is spread love in organization.
My one word response there is joy. I'm and here we'll break your rules again. We just expand on all these. I am a huge believer in building and developing a team of people where there's genuine support, care, and love for them as people. And in our company's vision, one of the pieces that we have spelled out very clearly is that we don't expect to be the last place that most people work, but that if their time at Scratch can be a period where they can grow personally and professionally, and it could be a stepping stone, and that means that they get, let's take it extreme for a second, that means they get poached by somebody else and offered a big giant raise. That is something for us to celebrate. That is something for us to take joy and pride in. It also means that with our organization, if we can clearly define who we are, what we stand for, what we believe in, that it won't be the right place for everybody. And some of my best friends in the world could not work on our team. And that's okay too. It's not a judgment on the company or that team, nor on the individuals, right? It's like anything else. It's like a marriage. You can't be married to everybody. You're going to find a place where you fit, and lots of places where you don't. And I digress and go sideways.
It's so, this is so powerful and so true. I completely share this with you, Ian. Well, a final question. I'd love to hear a final word of wisdom from you for entrepreneurs, leaders, athletes also, if you want, around the world. What would be your final word of wisdom?
Yeah, I think that's a question that gets asked, and I love the way you're asking that, wisdom as opposed to advice. I think that's a word that resonates with me a whole lot more, right? Advice implies that I know what's best for somebody else, or that you would know what's best for me, and I don't think that's the case. But I would say trust yourself. I can tell you It's just a funny story, but quick one. In our business, when we were first starting, right? A couple people from the athletic sporting world, right? I was an engineer. My business partner was a physiologist. Like, we didn't know anything about business. And we believed and were told that we needed to build, which I only now know is essentially, a financial model. And I remember us paying $5,000 or $6,000 to have, a little consulting firm build us out this financial model. And I remember getting it and being incredibly frustrated that we spent $5,000 on this model that, in my arrogance, I was like, I could have built this on my phone in Google Sheets. And obviously there's some arrogance and some ego tied up into that, which is not a great thing, but I think it is a powerful example of people, particularly when they're trying to start something new, thinking that somebody else knows something they don't. And experience matters, don't get me wrong, but I also think that if we trust ourselves, believe in the information we have, and are okay if we're wrong, that moving forward with that belief is a really, really powerful step to take. And then again, if you're wrong, that's okay. Try again.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ian, for being with me today, and for all that you're doing. You said starting with your people, and also all that you're doing for the communities with your company. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for listening. Connect with us through SpreadLoveIO.com, Apple, Google, or Spotify to hear more from great leaders in healthcare. Don't forget to always spread love in your organizations and spread the word around you to inspire others and amplify this movement our world so desperately needs.